Hello everybody, bonjour tout le monde. Je vais d'abord faire ma déclaration en anglais et puis après en français. Albertans, like Quebecers, have been very concerned for a long time about the erosion of provincial autonomy. Canada's federal system was designed to ensure a clear division of powers between the federal and provincial governments as outlined in our Constitution. However, over the years, the federal government has increasingly encroached on areas of provincial jurisdictions, creating what can only be described as imperial federalism. The federal government now interferes in many areas where it has no business, such as healthcare, education, natural resources, housing, local infrastructures, and many other domains that are explicitly under provincial jurisdictions. This intrusion has led to inefficiencies, duplication of services, and a lack of accountability. Instead of letting provinces address the unique needs of their populations, the federal government imposes one-size-fits-all solutions that often fail to consider regional differences. The federal government also constantly uses its so-called spending power, which does not exist in our Constitution, to intervene in provincial exclusive jurisdictions. We see this in healthcare. Ottawa transfers $52 billion every year to provinces, and in exchange for this money, it forces them to keep a bureaucratic socialist system that is the worst performing of all developed countries. Hundreds of thousands of Canadians are on waiting lists, and many die while waiting. The Trudeau Liberals have even created entirely new unconstitutional national programs such as pharmacare, daycare, and dental care. They gave billions of dollars to provinces and then dictate how to spend the money, even though these are provincial exclusive jurisdictions. This undermines the principles of federalism and prevents innovation at the provincial level. The result is a bloated, inefficient federal bureaucracy that prioritizes central control in the imperial capital, Ottawa, over local decision-making. By concentrating power in Ottawa, the federal government is eroding the ability of provinces to govern efficiently and respond to the needs of their citizens. It also creates disaffection and feeds the separatist movement in Quebec and Alberta. The People's Party believes it is time to restore the balance of power and return to a system of true federalism that respects the Constitution and empowers provinces to take charge of their own affairs. We will respect provincial jurisdictions and end all federal intrusions into areas of provincial responsibility, such as healthcare, education, and natural resources. To replace healthcare transfer to provinces, we will give the provinces control over the GST, which will allow them to raise equivalent amounts of money to pay for healthcare services. But they will be free to manage their healthcare system the way they want and innovate to offer better care. We will get rid of Ottawa's unconstitutional spending power and abolish all the new national programs created by the Trudeau government. We will also review all federal programs to identify and eliminate those that overlap with or undermine provincial responsibilities. Here in Alberta, many people want the province to have more control over the police, pensions, and other areas where Quebec, for example, has more autonomy. I think you should have the control over your own responsibilities. The People's Party will support Albertans who want more freedom and autonomy from Ottawa. We are also the only party that wants to reform the unfair equalization formula program and drastically cut the amounts that are redistributed to provinces while respecting the Constitution. It is time for Ottawa to mind its own business. It cannot even manage its own core responsibility properly. It's completely ridiculous that the federal government is also trying to do the jobs of the provinces when everything is broken in Ottawa. You cannot expect the Liberals, of course, to do anything about any of this. They are the party of imperial federalism. They only have one goal, to centralize even more power in Ottawa. But Pierre Poilievre conservatives and his fake conservatives won't do anything either. Poilievre confirmed that he will not cut any of Trudeau's new social programs. The Conservative Party will also do nothing to change the unfair equalization program. The Conservative Party is only conservative in one sense. It conserves everything the Liberals have done. It is time to free the provinces here in Alberta from imperial federalism. It is time for reform with the People's Party of Canada. Maintenant, je vais faire ma déclaration en français. Les Albertains, tout comme les Québécois, sont très préoccupés depuis bien longtemps par l'érosion de l'autonomie provinciale. La Fédération canadienne a été conçue pour assurer une division claire des pouvoirs entre le gouvernement fédéral et les gouvernements provinciaux, comme l'énonce très bien notre Constitution. Cependant, au fil des ans, le gouvernement fédéral a empiété de plus en plus sur les champs de compétences provinciales, ce qui a créé une sorte de fédéraliste impérial. Cet empiètement a eu pour conséquence de centraliser le pouvoir à Ottawa et de saper l'autonomie des provinces et des territoires. Le gouvernement fédéral s'ingère maintenant dans de nombreux domaines où il n'a pas d'affaires, comme la santé, l'éducation, les ressources naturelles et les infrastructures locales et bien d'autres domaines de compétences exclusives provinciales. Cette intrusion a entraîné des inefficacités, le dédoublement de programmes et un manque de responsabilisation. Au lieu de laisser les provinces répondre aux besoins uniques de leur population, le gouvernement fédéral impose des solutions mur à mur qui ne tiennent souvent pas compte des différences régionales et provinciales. Le gouvernement fédéral utilise aussi constamment son soi-disant pouvoir de dépenser, qui n'existe pas dans notre Constitution, pour intervenir dans les champs de compétences provinciales. Nous voyons cela dans le domaine de la santé. Ottawa transfère 52 milliards de dollars chaque année aux provinces et en échange de cet argent, il les force à maintenir un système bureaucratique, socialiste, inefficace, qui a la pire performance de tous les pays développés. Des centaines de milliers de Canadiens sont sur des listes d'attente et beaucoup meurent en attendant. Les libéraux de Trudeau ont même créé de nouveaux programmes nationaux inconstitutionnels comme l'assurance médicaments, les garderies et les soins dentaires. Ils donnent des milliards de dollars aux provinces, puis dictent aux provinces la façon dont elles doivent dépenser cet argent, même s'il s'agit de compétences provinciales. Cela mine le principe même du fédéralisme et étouffe l'innovation au niveau provincial. Le résultat est une bureaucratie fédérale gonflée, inefficace, qui privilégie le contrôle central dans la capitale impériale à Ottawa plutôt que les décisions locales. En concentrant le pouvoir à Ottawa, le gouvernement fédéral sape la capacité des provinces de gouverner efficacement et de répondre aux besoins de leurs citoyens. Le gouvernement fédéral crée aussi l'insatisfaction et alimente les mouvements séparatistes au Québec et en Alberta. Le Parti populaire estime qu'il est temps de rétablir l'équilibre des pouvoirs et de revenir à un véritable fédéralisme qui respecte la Constitution et donne aux provinces les moyens de prendre en charge leurs propres affaires. Nous respectons les compétences provinciales et mettrons fin à toutes les intrusions fédérales dans les domaines de responsabilité provinciale, comme les soins de santé, l'éducation et les ressources naturelles. Pour remplacer les transferts aux provinces en matière de santé, le Parti populaire donnera aux provinces le contrôle entier de la TPS, ce qui leur permettra de recueillir des sommes équivalentes pour payer les services de santé. Mais elles seront aussi libérées de gérer leur système de santé comme bon leur semble et d'innover pour offrir de meilleurs soins à leur population. Nous éliminerons aussi le pouvoir de dépenser qui est inconstitutionnel et nous allons abolir tous les programmes nationaux créés par le gouvernement Trudeau. Le Parti populaire examinera également tous les programmes fédéraux afin d'identifier et d'éliminer ceux qui se chevauchent ou minent les responsabilités provinciales. Ici, en Alberta, beaucoup de gens veulent que la province ait plus de contrôle sur la police, les pensions et d'autres domaines, comme le Québec, par exemple, a beaucoup plus d'autonomie que la province d'Alberta. Je pense que vous devriez avoir tous ces pouvoirs et le contrôle sur votre destinée. Le PPC appuiera les Albertains qui veulent plus de liberté et d'autonomie provinciale par rapport à Ottawa. Nous sommes aussi le seul parti qui veut réformer la formule injuste de péréquation et réduire considérablement les montants qui sont redistribués aux provinces tout en respectant la Constitution canadienne. Il est grand temps qu'Ottawa se mêle de ses affaires. Il ne peut même pas gérer ses propres responsabilités fondamentales. Il est tout à fait ridicule que le gouvernement fédéral essaie aussi de faire le travail des provinces alors que tout est brisé à Ottawa. On ne peut pas évidemment satisfaire et faire ce que les libéraux font actuellement, s'ingérer dans les champs de compétences des provinces. Les libéraux ne régleront pas le problème de l'autonomie des provinces. Ils sont le parti du fédéralisme impérial. Ils n'ont qu'un seul objectif, centraliser encore plus les pouvoirs à Ottawa. Mais Pierre Poilievre et ses faux conservateurs ne feront rien non plus. Poilievre a confirmé qu'il ne touchera à aucun des nouveaux programmes sociaux de Trudeau. Le Parti conservateur du Canada ne fera rien non plus pour changer la formule inéquitable de péréquation. Le Parti conservateur n'est que conservateur en seulement un terme. Il conserve tout ce que les libéraux ont fait. Il est temps de libérer les provinces. Il est temps d'avoir un vrai fédéralisme respectueux des pouvoirs des provinces et il est temps de faire ces réformes avec le Parti populaire du Canada. Merci. Et maintenant, je serai prêt à répondre aux questions. Thank you very much. And now I'll be ready to answer the questions.
Conservatives is a vote for the Liberal Party, as in they're kind of the same? Or do you think that one is worse than the other?
Yeah, you know, a vote for the Conservative Party of Canada is like a vote for the Liberals, because on the most important issues for example, Albertans, the Conservative Party of Canada and Pierre Poilievre won't do anything. Like I said in my speech, they won't reform the equalization payments. They won't cut radically the equalization payment. And that's unfair. That formula is unfair and inefficient. We are the only party that is speaking about that. Actually, you may know that the equalization payments last year was $26 billion. We at the People's Party will cut half of that. We will save $13 billion, and the equalization payment will be $13 billion. Why doing that? Because we need to change the formula to be fair, but also that will give the right incentive to poor provinces, like my own province in Quebec, to develop their own natural resources. In Quebec, as you may know, we have shale gas, but there's a moratorium on the exploitation of shale gas, because if they do that, they will be the Quebec province will be richer, and they will have fewer money coming from the equalization payments. We need to change the formula, be radically less generous. That will be the only incentive for Quebec and other provinces to develop their own natural resources. And I can add also on climate change. Climate change, Trudeau and not Trudeau, Carney and Poilievre are the same. They will do everything to achieve the Paris Accord target. Poilievre won't impose a carbon tax, but he will impose more regulations on businesses, and he will also spend billions of dollars on a new technology, carbon capture technology, because for Poilievre and Trudeau, CO2 is a pollutant. For us and for the science, CO2 is a gas essential for life. It is food for plants. It is not a pollutant. So that being said, we don't need to spend billions of dollars to capture CO2 and put it in the ground. There's a natural technology to do that, plants, because CO2 is food for plants. So on the climate change, on the equalization formula, on the tariff, for example, both Poilievre and Carney are ready to go on with that trade war with the US. We must not impose tariffs on Canadians. We did it. That is a tax that Canadians are paying. And now with inflation, Canadians cannot afford that. So if you want to work for Canadians, you need to not impose any counter tariffs and have a new deal with Trump as soon as possible.
Do you think Conservative voters are more or less concerned about vote splitting now compared to previous elections?
You know, there's no such thing as vote splitting. You know, you own your own vote. People own their own vote. So you must vote for the party that is in line with your values. What I'm telling Canadians, you know, the People's Party is the only party that is in line with Western civilization values. We will end all wokeism. You know, we know that a biological man, must not play in sport against women. All that woke ideology that the federal government is promoting, and Poilievre is not saying anything about that. So if you want real changes, you need to vote in line with your values. You'll have more chances to have what you want. But voting for the Liberals is going, you know, into a wall at high speed, and voting for the Conservative is going into a wall at, the official speed or the lower speed. Both of them are not speaking about the real issues, and you know, a Conservative government or a Liberals government, it won't change anything for Albertans and for Canadians. We need to tackle these issues. We need to end mass immigration. Poilievre and Carney are not speaking about that. That's a huge problem for Canadians. We have, people who are coming here, they don't share our values, they don't integrate into our country, our society, and they also are not speaking English or French. It's very difficult for them to be part of our society. So let's end mass immigration when 70% of Canadians are saying no to mass immigration, and these establishment political parties are not listening to Canadians. So if you want bold reforms and real reforms, that's only the People's Party who will deliver that.
How do you stay motivated when the polls are really showing this is a two-party race right now?
You know, I don't think that it will be that result at the election. We still have 2 weeks. Everything can happen. For example, look in 2011, Jack Layton with the NDP in Quebec, you know, they were nowhere to be seen in the polls, and they were able in the general election in 2011 to have 58 candidates elected on 78 ridings in Quebec. So everything can happen, and you know, our goal is to be out there, speak to Canadians, and telling them, if you want real changes in this country, we are the only option.
What's the goal for your party in this election?
The goal is to grow our percentage of the vote. The goal is to win the battle of ideas, and the goal is to fight for what we believe with our candidates all across the country. I'm very pleased right now that I'm here with our candidates here in Alberta and Calgary. They're ready to fight for Canadians, and our goal is to make history at this election. You may have the first PPC candidate elected, and maybe more. We'll see in 2 weeks.
You're talking about like slowing down immigration. What are you going to do to like replace the workforce? Are you going to like do things to increase like the birth rate in the country, or what's your plans to get the next generation of like workers?
Yeah, the Liberals and the Conservatives are telling us we need more and more people in Canada because, you know, our population is aging. But the reality is all these immigrants that are coming here are not so young, you know, because you have the reunification of family. When they are coming here, they have their brothers, sister, grandmom, granddad, uncles that are coming here. So Statistics Canada did a survey about that, and they're not as young. It won't have an impact on the aging of the population. So what is happening right now with all these immigrants, you know, we are bringing cheap labor for big corporations. We need to end that. It's time for Canadians to have jobs, and we may be in a recession right now. So what I'm telling Canadians about that, our goal is to have people that will integrate into our society. So for businesses, if they want to have Canadians working for them and with them, they just need to increase their offer. You know, if they increase the offer and the salaries, maybe they will have more Canadians that will apply for their jobs, that being said. And also, if you want to solve the productivity challenge that we have in this country for a long time, we need to also be sure that our businesses will reinvest to be more productive, more robotic, and, you know, investing in their productivities. So that's a way to solve the problems of our productivity. But to do that, we need to give them more of their own money to Canadians and businesses. That's why our plan is to have a flat tax on business and also to abolish the capital gains tax. So for me, the aging of the population, we need to solve that with Canadians. So the way to do that, as you know, young couples are not able to afford a house, and they're saying they want to buy a house before having kids. So let's solve the housing crisis. The way to solve that, it's a question of supply and demand. We want to solve it by the demands, having a moratorium on immigration, a pause on immigration for a couple of years. That will solve the housing crisis. That will give a right incentive for couples, young couples, to be able to buy a house and having kids. And actually, if you balance the budget in 1 year, I'm very concerned about Poliev and Carney. They are not telling us when they will balance the budget. For them, more debts and more deficit, it's okay. For us, it is not okay. We know that the deficit of today are the taxes of tomorrow or the inflation of tomorrow. We need to be serious to balance the budget in 1 year. We will do that. We will cut $60 billion to balance the budget in 1 year. And after that, we will lower taxes to every Canadian, and that will be the right incentive for young couples to have more of their own money in their own pockets and to have kids if they want.
For the people on the Zoom, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. Si vous avez des questions sur le Zoom, levez la main.
It is important because, as you know, at the last election, nationally, we had an average of 5% of support all across the country. Here in Alberta, the average was 10% for us. So, you know, there's a lot of people in Alberta who understand that we need to do bold reform in this country, and we are the only the only party that is ready to do that with them. So we have a lot of support in Alberta, and maybe we'll have our first candidate elected here coming from that province at this election.
How would you advocate for Alberta's energy sector?
First, withdraw from the Paris Accord. No more subsidies to the green technology. The net zero in 2050, we won't buy that, we won't do that because there's no climate emergency. Second, build pipelines, and we are able to do that. If you ask me the question, how you will do that? By using the Constitution. In our Constitution, we have the clause 9210. If you read that clause in our Constitution, every national infrastructures are under the control of the federal government. What I'm telling you, if the Trudeau government or the Polyev government, if we have a Liberals or a Conservative government, if they're serious about pipelines, to build pipelines, they must tell you that they will use the Constitution. And yes, when you use that, the federal government will have unique responsibility over that infrastructure. The provinces won't be able to block that. The court won't be able to block that. That's the only way to be sure to be able to build pipelines in this country. But Polyev and Carney won't do that, so maybe we will have to wait years before having a pipeline here. So we will build pipeline and use the Constitution to do that. We will withdraw from the Paris Accord. We will lower taxes to businesses, 15% tax rate for every corporation in this country. And so we will also repeal all the bills that the Trudeau government did passed on, against the oil and gas industry. I can, with us, not only the oil and gas industry will be prosperous, but it will be time for every industry to be prosperous and to do what they have to do and what they can do, creating wealth and prosperity for our country and for Canadians.
Are you concerned that some of the issues that drew people to your party in the last election, such as pandemic restrictions, aren't as big a deal anymore? We'll have to have this election because of that?
At the last election, the main issue was, you're right, that was the draconian measures that our governments, provincial governments and federal government did impose on us. And we were the only party that was speaking for freedom of choice with informed consent. Actually, we were right at that time when we said that the vaccine was not safe and effective. And so that was a reality. We know that right now. And this election, I want this election to be an election on mass immigration. With Trump and the tariffs, now, you have in Ottawa fake patriotism. The Conservatives and the Liberals are telling Canadians that our enemy is Donald Trump. Our enemy is not Donald Trump. We can have a deal with him. Actually, President Trump wanted deals, but also he wants us to put everything on the table, including the cartel in supply management, in milk, dairy, and poultry. I'm the only one who is saying, yes, we must put that on the table for Canadian consumers, because as you know, Canadian consumers are paying twice the price for these products if you compare that with prices in the US. It will be good for Canadian consumers to put that on the table. And President Trump did tweet 3 times on X about the tariff that we are imposing to the Americans, 300%. It's unfair. And President Trump said that he wants reciprocal tariff. He said, if you impose 25% tariff, I will do the same. Let's have a deal, put everything on the table, ending that cartel in supply management and having reciprocal tariff with 0 tariff on everything. And like that, you'll be able to have a deal with President Trump. But Carney and Polyev are not working for Canadians. They are working for the cartel. They want this cartel, the dairy, poultry, and eggs cartel, to keep their privilege. And by doing that, they won't be able to have a deal with President Trump. So if that's a big difference with us and all these two establishment political parties.
I hope you are in an election. What do you do for the war is Israel and Palestine?
Yeah, so the question is about the war in Gaza. As I said, the People's Party of Canada is there for Canadians. I'm not pro-Palestine, I'm not pro-Israel, I'm pro-Canada. So we need to promote peace and prosperity. I don't want to send money over there like I didn't want us to send money in Ukraine for the war in Ukraine. Ukraine is a corrupt government. That was not our war. And Polyev and Trudeau and Carney did spend $20 billion that we don't have, and they gave that to a corrupt country over there. And I want to work with President Trump to be sure to have a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. That is the solution. The history of our country is to promote peace and peacekeeping. We must do that. We must not engage in any wars. And actually, our Canadian forces doesn't have the equipment to do that. Our Canadian forces is a woke organization. We need to fire all these generals and put generals in charge who won't be woke. And after that, reinvesting in our Canadian forces to achieve the 2% target of our GDP. That's important for our own security, and at the same time, we need to protect our borders. Question online?
No, we don't have. On n'a pas de questions du tout. No, no question online. We don't have any question.
So do we have any question on? Okay.
We don't have any question online.
Thank you very much.
No
Merci
question.
beaucoup. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. Yeah.